Release date, November 2nd, 2022. This is TBD Sportscast, college football with your host. I'm Mason.
And I'm Isaac.
Welcome to another episode of TBD CFB, Season 3, Episode 12, with this episode entitled CFP Confusion. You know what? One of the greatest times of the year in college football season, the college football playoff rankings have officially started. Goodbye, AP, you suck. But not going to lie, CFP rankings kind of suck too, in a couple ways. So consider this a post-reaction. We got the rankings from the CFP committee last night at 7, and me and Isaac are just kind of hopping on to display our thoughts, per se, about the rankings that were given to us from the College Football Playoff Committee. So we'll go ahead and start out with 25 to 21. Let's see what we think. So number 25, UCF. Number 24, Texas. Number 23, Oregon State. Number 22, NC State. And number 21, Wake Forest. When I first saw this, I actually kind of agreed with it. And so one of the main things we're going to be talking about with just this week's rankings is how there is a possibility that the College Football Playoff Committee is doing what they kind of do some years and trying to pad Bama's strength of schedule, which is why Texas is at number 24. The other ones I kind of agree with, though. You know, you got 6-2 Oregon State. NC State maybe a little high for me at 22. But UCF coming off that win against Cincinnati, they're also 6-2. So, yeah, I mean, you got some good things here. But, I mean, I can definitely see how people would think that the CFP committee is trying to pad Bama's schedule by putting Texas at 24 because, I mean, they're 5-3. You know, if anything, they should probably not even be ranked.
Yeah, and I have to agree. You know, all in all, I don't hate this first five. You know, I think, unfortunately, I agree with you. Texas probably shouldn't be ranked. There again, looking at it from this perspective, at this point, Alabama has another top 25 win, so you kind of have that idea in mind. But, you know, it all goes back to, I go back to the beginning of the year, you know, week 2. If Quinn Ewers would have been healthy, I think, and if Texas defense didn't crap the bed, I still think they beat Bama. And, you know, Texas, I think in a better situation with the quarterback, I think Texas wouldn't be a 5-3 team. I think they would be a top 15 team, but they're not. And so looking at it from that perspective, but yeah, 5-3, I think they probably should be unranked. Other than that, you know, NC State's not a bad team, but since their quarterback got hurt the other week, they are not a good team. I mean, they're just not. You know, I'm not trying to discredit Syracuse, but they should have beat Syracuse based on how they played the first few weeks of the year. And then their quarterback goes down, they get hurt. That's the only fault that I have, but this first five is not bad. I don't hate it.
Yeah, and I don't either. I actually kind of like it. And I like that Texas is in there because I actually do think they've had a pretty good season. And, you know, with Ewers in, they've been playing so much better. And I think that is definitely a part of the reason why the committee brought in Texas. Not to just harp on Texas, but I think that's some pretty good reasons. Maybe some shaky ones, but, you know, I think I can kind of see what the College Football Playoff Committee was putting by putting them in. Next five, this is number 20 through number 16. This is number 20, Syracuse. Number 19, Tulane. 18, Oklahoma State. 17, North Carolina. And number 16, Illinois. Some of these I was a little thrown off by, especially because of some of the teams above it, because you have a 7-1 Tulane at 19 and a 7-1 North Carolina at 17 and a 7-1 Illinois at number 16. I actually think that Illinois should be ranked a little bit higher, and North Carolina too. Tulane, I understand because they're not a Power 5 conference. They've got a loss on the schedule. They're probably lucky to be where they are anyway. So that's the thought process behind that. But you also have to look at, too, there's not a lot of one-loss teams in non-Power 5 conferences. It's really hard to find some right now, especially with Cincinnati taking that loss to UCF. You
know, and Mason, looking at this next five, you know, Syracuse being at 20, you know, I think they're still hanging around, you know, based on the run they gave Clemson 2 weeks ago. You know, looking at Tulane kind of came out of nowhere. You know, 7-1, did not expect that from them, but the Green Wave, they look strong. Oklahoma State, you know, they're kind of flirting in there. Carolina also. North Carolina, sorry. I'm from North Carolina, so I call them Carolina. My Carolina, I think they're probably a little bit low. I agree with you. You know, 7-1, I mean, it's just, in my opinion, it's hard to see how these few 6-2 teams are above them. But then you look at who the 6-2 teams are, and it's like, okay, maybe it makes sense. You know, and then Illinois, you know, they're kind of under the radar, but they're a decent Big Ten team. This next five, I once again, I don't hate it. I think the top 15 is where we get into the real meat of it. But I like this next set of five. I think UNC and Illinois should probably be a little higher, but other than that, it's not too bad.
Yeah, and that's where I am with it. I don't hate it, but I understand why Oklahoma State is here. Okay, 6-2 loss at number 18. Syracuse as well, coming off a loss against Notre Dame. Understand that one 100% as well. But Illinois and North Carolina, I just don't like them at 16 and 17. Especially Illinois, they're 7-1 in the Big Ten. They should be ranked higher, especially because of the next five coming up. All right, we have number 15 Penn State, number 14 Utah, number 13 Kansas State, number 12 UCLA, and number 11 Ole Miss. Now, Penn State 6-2, Utah 6-2, Kansas State 6-2. That right there is 15, 14, 13. I think Illinois should probably be ranked above every single one of those teams because Utah had a pretty tough loss to UCLA, and Kansas had two tough losses, one to Tulane, by the way, and one to TCU, who is the reigning champion in the Big 12 right now. I don't really know if I agree with all that. I understand why they ranked Kansas State so high because they've actually played pretty well. They got a big win against Oklahoma and then a huge win last weekend against Oklahoma State. So, I understand. I can actually kind of agree with Kansas State being there even though they are 2-loss, but not Utah and Penn State, especially Penn State being 2-loss, having maybe because they played Ohio State so close last weekend and then, gave it away in the fourth quarter. But they got 2 losses to the two best teams in the Big Ten, Ohio State and Michigan. So I don't think that that's where Penn State should be. I think Illinois should be above them, probably at 15 or 14 above Utah.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I'm kind of on the flip side of it. Utah being 6-2, they're a team that in all reality, they should be 7-1. They should have beat Florida, looking all the way back to the beginning of the year. But putting that to the side, Utah's not a bad 6-2 team. They had a big win against USC where they went for 2, where it's like you make the PAT and you tie it, you go for 2 and you get it and you win, you miss it, you lose. They pulled all the stops out and they got it. So, Utah, I don't hate them being at 14. I still am just questionable about 15 through 13, all three of them being 2-loss teams above guys like Illinois and North Carolina. I don't quite understand that, like you said, Mason. But, other than that, Ole Miss at 11, UCLA at 12, I think that's fair. If Ole Miss would have beat LSU weekend before last, Ole Miss would definitely be a top 10 team in my opinion. But Penn State, they were handled by Michigan, and the score shows they were handled by Ohio State, but they played 3.5 quarters of really good football. So, I don't necessarily think that because they played Ohio State so well, I think they kind of earned that spot. But there again, they did get handled by Michigan, and you look at the fact that Michigan and Ohio State is going to determine the Big Ten again. So, I don't know, man. It's a pretty good set. Kansas State's had a good year, so they're not bad either. Not a bad set of 5, but a very interesting one with 3 2-loss teams being in the top 15. I'll just say that.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what you're saying. I could even see Ole Miss higher, and I understand the reason why they're not because of the next team that we're going into. That's also kind of controversial. So let's go ahead and hit that. We had number 10 LSU, a 6-2 team with losses to with their first game against FSU, Florida State, and with a loss against Tennessee at home, who Tennessee absolutely manhandled them in Death Valley. Sorry, Isaac, but it's the truth. I think you know it. But with that being said, this is where we kind of get that idea of the playoff committee really trying to pad Bama's schedule. I know some LSU fans who are really thrown off by this because what happened was after they beat Ole Miss, they came in from unranked, went straight to 18. After the bye week that they had last week, the AP put them at 15. And then we come into the college football playoff rankings 2 days later, and they've jumped all the way to 10. They're a 2-loss team. So I don't know what the playoff committee is looking at because they have a really tough loss against Tennessee at home, but they have an insanely good win against Ole Miss, and they have to play Alabama this weekend. So, Isaac, you being the LSU fan, I know this also threw you off a little bit for good and bad reasons. What do you think about the whole thing?
Well, I think a couple of things. Number one, I think that they are basing this decision too much off of the LSU team from weeks weeks 8 and 9, or the weeks before the bye week. We went into Florida and played really well, even though we gave up 35 points. Played really well, and then we beat Ole Miss considerably in Baton Rouge. So I think they're expecting a little bit too much off of the past couple of games. But all in all, it did throw me off because number one, I didn't expect us to be that high. Number two, I expected us probably about 15 to 20, the same as we were with the AP. But I have to wonder if it has anything to do with Bama, because if Bama beats us this coming weekend, then we get into the conversation of, now it's, Alabama has another top 10 win, LSU's 10. That's kind of what we were getting at earlier, and we'll get back into it. But I mean, I like us being at 10, but I don't understand why, based on looking at week 1, a team that lost by 1.2, a Florida State team that is nowhere on this list and was beaten considerably by Tennessee at home. It's like, how do you take those two games, an unranked loss and a whooping by the number 1 team, and figure that team deserves to be number 10? I don't get it, but go Tigers, man.
Look, man, I understand, but still, it just does kind of creep me out a little bit that they just jumped so high so fast. And I totally understand, that the FSU loss was kind of a fluke because of the missed extra point, and just some terrible special teams offensive line, coverage. But I don't know, man. I mean, again, they're a 2-loss team, and I don't know. I know the committee is taking that into account, but I really don't understand it. The next two teams coming in at 8 and 9, you got USC and Oregon. Not much to say there. USC took the loss to Utah, and Oregon took the loss to Georgia. And if you have to say which team is better, it's obviously Georgia. They're ranked higher, which is why Oregon is ranked above USC. But also because Oregon has been playing extremely good football since they got off of the Georgia game. Dan Lanning has been heading up the program there, transforming it. And also, as much as I hate to say it, old Bo Picks, man, he's playing good. I picked him up in fantasy on Fantrax, college fantasy football. It exists, it does, and he got me 500 points last week, and I was super excited about that. So,
and we're not sponsored, just so you know.
I wish we were. Fantrax, if you hear this, we love your program. It's awesome that we get to do college fantasy football. So if you hear it, hit us up. Maybe we can work some out. Anyway, that's. I mean, I don't know if you have anything to say about it, but I mean, you kind of mentioned it earlier. USC. Losing to Utah, because Utah decided to go for 2, and there was 20 seconds left in the game after that.
I don't have much to add to that. I agree with you, everything you said. Oregon is Georgia is obviously the better team in the losses between those two teams. In Georgia, I mean, they just throttled Oregon in week 1, and then, since then, Oregon has won 7 straight, and they've played really, really good football. So not much to add there, but Oregon's a good squad, man. And I honestly, if it comes down to them and UCLA, I like those guys, man. The Pac-12, they look pretty good this year. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Not much to say. It's just I think Oregon definitely has the better. It's kind of funny. They have the better loss. Even though not really. It's the loss to the better team. But USC was close to beating Utah.
It's a quality loss because it's a quality. As
team. Good as people were saying USC was, they should not have been that close to Utah, especially the way Utah had been struggling coming into that game. So usually the top 6 is where we get into the meat of things, but we're gonna start at 7. This is where we really this is where the College Football Playoff Committee kind of grinded my gears a little bit, and I know Isaac too. At number 7, we have TCU, the Horned Frogs, who are undefeated in the Big 12. Every team they've played in the Big 12, they've won against. Every team they've played this season, they've won against. They're undefeated, but they're at number 7 behind number 6, Bama. I kind of have a bone to pick with that. I'm just going to go ahead and go, number 5, Michigan, number 4, Clemson. I have a little bit of a bone to pick with that because while Clemson has played, some top 15 teams, look at what they've done since they've played. Wake Forest, who they won against barely in overtime, is now a 6-2 team who just got destroyed by Louisville this past weekend. Syracuse, who they barely beat by a touchdown and a little bit, just lost at home to Notre Dame this past weekend. And NC State, who they also played, and who played them close at home, is now 6-2. Now look, NC State lost their quarterback, but that's not an excuse. These teams are not good. I mean, they're good, but the fact that Clemson basically barely got by all of these teams and they're ranked number 4 when TCU is undefeated and has beaten way better teams in the Big 12 than teams in the ACC, and they're ranked at 7, I got a real bone to pick with that. I really think that Clemson should probably be the one in the number 6 or 7 ranking, and then TCU should be at least in the top 5. That's what I think. And if you really want to talk about it, I don't think that Alabama should be ranked above any team because they have a loss on their schedule. I don't care who the loss was to. I know it was to Tennessee, okay? Tennessee was ranked 6 and Alabama was ranked 3 during that game. So, yeah, that's definitely close, but, I mean, Alabama should have won that game. They made mistakes. They got the loss, and that's that. TCU, on the other hand, has proven that they can win games, and they've been winning every week in the Big 12. And until they take a loss, I don't think that they should be ranked below a one-loss team, especially in the top 10. They deserve to be in the top 6. I mean, but that's just my opinion. I think the TCU should be at 6 or at 5. I think that they should trade places with Clemson or Bama. If you want to put TCU behind Clemson at 6, and Clemson at 5 or whatever, that's fine with me.
100%. I think that number one, to put a one-loss team above, like you said, Mason, to put a one-loss team above any undefeated team is bull.
Especially in a Power 5 conference.
Absolutely, yeah, because TCU, even though the Big 12 isn't, they're not the SEC or whatever, but they are Power 5, and so, number one, TCU should be top 6. That's the first thing. Number two, like you said, I agree. I think Michigan should be 4. I would do Michigan 4, TCU 5. Clemson 6, Alabama 7. That's what I would do.
That's what I would do too.
Because, like you said, Clemson, when you look, as a fan of a team that lost to Florida State, Clemson was up on Florida State by 20. They only won by a touchdown, or maybe 10. I don't remember, but it was less than what their lead was. And so when you look at it from that perspective, they almost blew the game, just to be plumb honest. And so from that alone, Clemson has really struggled to get the wins they've gotten. Have they done it? Absolutely. But I don't think they're not a top 4 team, in my opinion. TCU should definitely be ranked above Alabama. And we'd have the same conversation if TCU was 7-1 and Bama was 8-0 and put Bama at 7. Number one, well, okay, this is totally theoretical because they wouldn't do that. But if they did, they'd say, well, Alabama's undefeated. They should be 100%. It goes both ways. So TCU should be above them.
Yeah,
and the fact that and number 2, and we could say, well, Bryce Young was out, blah blah blah. Absolutely, Alabama is not a top 10 team without Bryce Young. That's just my opinion because Bryce Young is a freaking stud. He was the Heisman last year for a reason, and Bryce Young is a great quarterback. But they almost lost to A&M. They almost lost to Texas, and people say, well, it was almost BFD.
Yeah. I got you there, man. I think we're definitely on the same page. Probably should have been Michigan at 4, TCU at 5, Clemson at 6, Alabama at 7. I think that's what makes the most sense. And I'm not going to harp on it forever. And I'm not trying to trash Alabama, and I'm not trying to trash Clemson. But just straight up looking at the facts, if you look at it and you look at strength of schedule and the amount of losses, that's just what makes sense. And I think the College Football Playoff Committee definitely has a little bit of bias towards Alabama, and I think that there definitely probably is a little bit of padding schedule and why some teams in this top 25 are ranked so high. But if you really look at it, I mean, things will even out as like the game changer games come up. And with that being said, let's look at the top 3. So number 3, Georgia. When I saw that, it really kind of made me upset, but I can't say that I necessarily disagree. We had a really close win, a super struggle win against Missouri in Como. Our defense struggled against Kent State. We probably should have put up more points than we did against Samford. I mean, we had a great game against Oregon, great game against South Carolina. We had a bounce back game against Auburn. We scored a lot of points, and we only gave up 10. And then a great game against Vanderbilt, 55-0. I don't care if it's Vanderbilt. Not allowing a team to score any points is super impressive. And then we trashed Florida, 42-20. We had a little bit of a rough third quarter there, but we came back. Defense stepped up. So I mean, we'll get into this the next episode. But you know what? Because you got Ohio State at 2 and Tennessee at 1. And as a Georgia fan, I'll say, you know what? Let them eat the rat poison and let us be the team to come after Tennessee. Not the other way around. games in Athens. And Kirby said it this week. If you're saying to the fans, if you can talk when you leave, you didn't yell enough. And I 100% agree with the sentiment. Can't say I disagree with the college football playoff ranking on that one, and it was a little unnerving to see Georgia fall, and that sucks, but it is what it is. So there you go.
On paper, I mean, yeah, like you said, Mason, on paper, Georgia, this is a correct ranking. From the whole body of work, when you look at who Georgia is as a program, and when you look at the guys that are ahead of them, or well, I shouldn't say the guys, Tennessee excluded, the number 2 team. I agree. But I agree with Kirby, man. Between the hedges this weekend, it's going to be wild, and it's going to be a good one. I mean, go Dogs.
Heck yeah, dude. Go freaking Dogs. And it does suck, but it's like I said, man, let Tennessee believe that there's something, all right? Because, I mean, look, Tennessee's a good team, okay? But I really think that, I'm going to let them eat the rat poison this week, and y'all can hear the pick on Friday when we do the game. But the one thing I can't agree with, though, I don't like Ohio State above us. I could understand putting Tennessee above us because they got the number 1. They beat the number 3 team in the country. They got a really big win against Alabama. And they trashed Kentucky last week, and they trashed LSU at home. But I understand, but not Ohio State. Ohio State has played cupcakes all year. Sure, they've won comfortably against cupcakes, but they really struggled against a good team on the road until, defense of Penn State gave it up in the fourth quarter. So I really just can't get behind Ohio State being ranked above us.
They call cupcakes a comfort food for a reason.
You dang right. And I know Isaac feels the same way, but I mean, that's pretty much our take on the Week 10 college football playoff rankings. And, we've talked about before how the college football playoff committee, they can be a little wild sometimes. You look back to we were talking about this earlier, 2016 when Penn State beat Ohio State and then they went to the championship and lost and they put Ohio State in. Or you look at 2017 when Auburn beat Georgia in the regular season and Alabama in the regular season, and then Georgia beat Auburn in the SEC championship, and guess who got put in? Georgia and Alabama. So the committee definitely has some favor towards those programs. I understand why, but because they're the money makers, and that's top programs. But I we'll see what happens. But that's pretty much it. Always remember, no matter what team you pull for, if you're on God's side, you're always on the winning team. Know that Romans 5:8 tells us that while we were still sinners, God sent his only son to die for us, not because of anything that we were, how good or amazing we were, but honestly because we were sinners who sinned against God, who needed saving. Jesus loves you. He took a cross to take the sin that you had, to pay the punishment for sin to God. God loves you. He wants to have a relationship with you, and I promise if you don't have Jesus, you need him. If you ever want to talk about that, you can always reach out to us. Hit us up on our Instagram DM, message us on Facebook, or just leave a comment on this YouTube video. We will talk with you about Jesus. We love you guys. We're praying for you, and we'll see you on Friday to make our picks for Week 10.
Later.
Bye-bye.